Here's something nobody warned you about. The moment you truly understand the edge of the universe, not just hear about it, but feel it, something in you cracks open. Not in a bad way. In the way a seed cracks open, you start to wonder if the biggest mystery out there isn't really out there at all. What if the edge of the universe is actually a mirror? And what if you've been running toward it your whole life, not to escape, but to finally see your own face clearly? Stay with me, because by the end of this, the word edge is never going to mean the same thing to you again. I want to start by being honest with you about something. Most videos about the cosmos, about the universe, about its size, its age, its edges or lack thereof, are really about impressing you. They want to make you say, wow. They want you to feel small in a specific, curated way. They'll pull out the numbers. 93 billion light-years across, 13.8 billion years old, more stars than grains of sand on every beach on Earth combined. And those numbers are real. Those numbers are extraordinary. But here's what I've noticed. After a lifetime of thinking about these things, information alone doesn't change how a person feels about being alive. A fact can rattle around in your head for years and never touch the part of you that actually needs touching. This video is trying to do something different. It's trying to use the universe, its most radical, most disorienting, most beautiful property, which is its apparent refusal to end, as a lens through which to look at your own life, your own limits, your own edges. Because here's the thing I think most of us are carrying around without quite naming it. We are edge-obsessed. We structure enormous parts of our emotional lives around the terror of limits, the edge of our patience, the edge of our resources, the edge of what our body can do, the edge of what our relationships can bear, the edge of what we think we deserve. We spend so much energy either sprinting toward those edges in a kind of desperate bravado or white-knuckling ourselves back from them in panic that we rarely stop to ask a very simple, very important question. What if the model is wrong? What if the universe itself, the largest thing we know of, has been trying to show us a different way of understanding limits all along? And here is the core myth that this video is going to bust, gently but completely. The myth is that understanding has edges, that there is a point at which reality becomes unknowable and you must turn around, that every story, including the story of you, has a fixed ending already written. Physics, real physics, not the dumbed-down inspirational poster version, says something radically different. Every edge we have ever found in science has eventually turned out to be a door. Every that is impossible has eventually, sometimes centuries later, become, wait, look at this. The universe doesn't reward the person who finds the edge and stops. It has never once rewarded that. It rewards every single time the person who gets to the edge and asks, what is this edge actually made of? Is it real, or is it just the limit of my current instruments? Is it a wall, or is it an invitation to revise my entire framework? So what I want to do with you today, and I mean that personally, I'm talking to you, one person, not a crowd, is take a walk to the edge of the universe. And then I want to show you what we find when we get there. And then I want to invite you to consider that what we find there has been true about your own life this whole time. That the edge you are most afraid of, whatever it is, whatever form it takes in your specific, particular, unrepeatable life, is probably not what you think it is. And the universe, that ridiculous, gorgeous, baffling system of which you are an irreducible part, has been modeling this for you since before you were born. Let's begin with a story. Not a metaphor yet. A real story, or as close to a real story as I can make it. Let's call it the story of the wrong map. Imagine someone, a young person, curious, full of the particular kind of energy that comes from thinking you might be able to figure things out if you just work hard enough, who falls in love with physics, not because it's practical, not because it leads anywhere sensible, but because it promises something extraordinary, a language that the universe itself speaks. A set of symbols and relationships so precise, so carefully built, that when you write them down correctly, you're not describing reality from the outside, you're actually participating in it. You're in a conversation with the deepest structure of what exists. And that is intoxicating. That is the kind of thing that makes you forget to eat. This young person, let's not give them a name, because the truth is this young person is inside every scientist, inside every genuinely curious human being, falls in love specifically with models, diagrams, equations that describe boundaries. Boundary conditions, they're called in the technical language, and the name is perfect. Because what a boundary condition does is it tells you where your description of a system ends. It says, up to here, this equation applies. Beyond this point, different rules. It draws a line. And there is something so deeply, almost desperately satisfying about a drawn line. It tells you when you've understood enough. It tells you when you're allowed to stop. It gives you permission to say, I have contained this thing. I know where it lives. I know its edges. And this young person becomes very good at drawing those lines. They become, in fact, slightly addicted to them. Because every time you draw a boundary condition, every time you successfully contain a system in an equation, there's a feeling of mastery, of completion, of having wrestled something wild into a shape that your mind can hold. And that feeling is wonderful. I want to be clear about that. It is genuinely wonderful. The ability to model reality, to draw a picture of how something works and have that picture actually predict what the thing will do next, that is one of the most beautiful things human beings have ever learned to do. But here is where the story gets interesting. Here is where it always gets interesting. Because this young person, armed with their love of boundary conditions and their faith in the power of a well-drawn line, eventually encounters something that refuses to be contained, not because the mathematics is wrong, not because they're not smart enough, but because the thing being described, the universe itself, doesn't have the kind of edges that fit inside a model of the type they've learned to draw. The universe, it turns out, is not a system that can be fully bounded. It is not a problem with a tidy solution. It is more like a conversation that keeps going, keeps deepening, keeps opening into new rooms every time you think you've found the last wall. Let me be specific about what I mean, because vague talk about the universe being vast and mysterious isn't useful. I want to tell you something precise, something that should, if you really sit with it, genuinely rattle your understanding of what a boundary is. When we talk about the observable universe, the part of the universe that we can in principle detect, that we have information about, we're talking about a sphere roughly 93 billion light-years in diameter. That number is almost impossible to process in any human way. A light-year is the distance light travels in 1 year, moving at 300,000 kilometers per second, never stopping, never slowing down, 300,000 kilometers per second for an entire year. And the observable universe is 93 billion of those, so that's already beyond any map the mind can draw with any comfort. But here is the thing. That is not the universe. That is only the universe we can see. The observable universe is defined by a specific, physical limitation. It is the sphere within which light has had time to reach us since the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. Beyond that sphere, there is more. More matter, more space, more galaxies, more of everything. We simply cannot see it because the light from those regions hasn't had enough time to reach us yet. Or, more precisely, because the universe has been expanding, is expanding right now, this very second. As you watch this, the light from the most distant regions is in some cases moving away from us, faster than it's traveling toward us, which means it will never arrive. Those regions are beyond our cosmic horizon, not because they're behind a wall, but because the space between us and them is stretching faster than light can cross it. And then there's the deeper question, the one that keeps cosmologists up at night. Is the universe finite or infinite? We don't know. This is not a failure. This is an honest report from the frontier of human knowledge. The universe might be finite but unbounded, like the surface of a sphere. where you could travel forever in a straight line and never reach an edge, never fall off, never find a wall, but the total amount of space would still be finite. Or it might be genuinely, actually, structurally infinite, with space and matter and galaxies going on literally without end in every direction. Or something stranger still. We don't know, and the honest thing to say is, we may never know, at least not from inside it. Now, here is the moment I want you to stop and notice what you feel. When I tell you that the universe might be infinite, or at least edgeless in any meaningful sense, what happens inside you? For most people, I've noticed there are two reactions that happen almost simultaneously, and they pull in opposite directions. The first reaction is something like wonder, something like vertigo, a pleasant, slightly dizzying sense of scale that temporarily makes your normal concerns feel smaller and more manageable. That's the reaction people expect. That's the wow that science communication is usually going for. But the second reaction, the one that comes just behind the first, quieter but often stronger, is something closer to anxiety, to resistance. Because a universe without edges means a universe without the kind of certainty we've been trained to want. It means there is no final answer to find, no ultimate map to draw, no point at which you can say, now I have understood everything and I am done. And for the young physicist in our story, and for many of us in many areas of our lives, that second reaction is the one that does the real work on you. The one that either breaks you or transforms you depending on what you do with it. The young physicist in our story, the one who loved boundary conditions, eventually had to face this directly, eventually had to sit with the fact that the universe was not going to fit inside any model they could build, not because the models were bad, but because reality is, at its deepest level, always larger than any picture of it. The map ends before the territory does. Every time, without exception, in every field, in every life. And what happened then? What happens when the person who has built their confidence, their sense of mastery, their whole identity around drawing clean lines and containing systems discovers that the system they most care about, the universe, or perhaps their own life, cannot be contained? Well, in the story I'm telling, what happened was a long period of discomfort, a period of sitting with what I might call productive wrongness, a period of holding the maps more loosely, not throwing them away. The maps still work, they still predict things, they're still beautiful and useful, but holding them with the knowledge that they are tools, not truths. That a model is an approximation always by definition, and the question is not, is this model perfect, but is this model useful? And do I understand where it stops being useful? That's a very different relationship with knowledge. It's less triumphant, it's more honest, and surprisingly, it turns out to be more powerful, because a model you hold loosely is a model you can improve. A certainty you clutch tightly is a ceiling. This is one of the most important things I've ever come to understand, and I want to say it plainly. The willingness to be wrong, the actual physical capacity to say, my map of this situation is incomplete, and I need to revise it. That is not a weakness. It is the most essential cognitive tool you have, and the universe has been modeling it for you your entire life. Every time a scientific theory got overturned by better evidence, every time a paradigm shifted, every time someone looked at the edge of the current understanding and asked, but wait, what's out there? And found that there was more, the universe was demonstrating something. It was showing you how it works. It works by revision. It works by building and rebuilding. It works by the willingness of the people inside it to be wrong about something they were absolutely certain of. Now I want to tell you a second story, and this one is stranger and more personal, and I want you to sit with it, slowly. Right now, as you watch this, light is hitting your eyes, light that left its source millions, in some cases billions of years ago. When you look at the night sky, if you've ever been somewhere dark enough to really see it, away from the city lights in a field or on a mountain or at sea, and you look up at the full scatter of stars, You are looking at the past, not metaphorically. Literally, the light from a star 100 light years away is 100 years old when it arrives. The light from the Andromeda Galaxy, the nearest large galaxy to our own, is 2.5 million years old when it reaches your eye. You are seeing that galaxy as it existed before Homo sapiens existed, before our species had its first thought. The photons entering your retina right now have been traveling since before your entire evolutionary lineage began. And here is the strangeness I want you to hold. The star that sent that light may no longer exist. Stars die, they exhaust their fuel, they collapse, they explode, they become something else entirely. The star whose light is touching you right now may have died 1 million years ago. There may be no star there anymore. You are receiving a message from something that no longer exists, and the message is still arriving, still complete, still doing exactly what light does, still illuminating. Now think about that for a moment. Light doesn't know it's old. It doesn't carry a timestamp that makes it feel like a relic, like something past its usefulness. It doesn't preface its arrival with, "I know this is technically 1 million years old, please adjust your expectations accordingly." It just arrives, in the present tense, full and complete, doing the thing it does. What is the human equivalent of that? What is the part of you, the experience, the knowledge, the insight, the love, the pain, the specific way you learn to see the world? What is the part of you that was formed long ago, maybe in circumstances that no longer exist, maybe in a version of your life that you've left behind that is still, right now, arriving in your present, still illuminating, still useful, still doing exactly what it was made to do? We have a habit, and I think it comes from the same place as the edge obsession, from the same deep need to draw clean lines and contain things. We have a habit of wanting to leave our past behind us, to place it firmly at our backs, to draw an edge between who we were and who we are. And sometimes that's healthy. Sometimes you genuinely need to put something down. But sometimes, and I think more often than we admit, what we call leaving the past behind is actually a kind of self-abandonment. We're trying to discard the light that came from our own earlier experiences because those experiences were painful or embarrassing, or because the person we were then doesn't match the story we're trying to tell about the person we are now. But the light from a dead star is still the light. The photons don't care that the star is gone. The illumination is real regardless of the source's current existence. And your past, the experiences, the losses, the moments of clarity that came in the middle of darkness, the things you learned by going through what you went through, those are not things that stop being true just because time has passed. They are still arriving, still illuminating. The question is whether you're willing to let them land. Whether you're willing to look at what they're showing you, even when what they're showing you is uncomfortable, even when they come from a version of yourself you'd rather not remember. The universe doesn't apologize for the age of its light. It doesn't retroactively disqualify ancient starlight from participating in the present. It just gives you the morning. It just gives you the night sky, full of the past made visible. And I think that's what we're supposed to do with the old parts of ourselves. Stop apologizing for their age. Start noticing what they're still illuminating. Now, here is the question I want you to hold as we move into what I think are the most important ideas in this whole conversation. If the universe has no edge, and it doesn't, not in any meaningful sense, not in the way we usually imagine edges, if the maps we draw always end before the territory does, if old light is still light, and the past is still arriving, still useful, then why are you so convinced that you could run out? Not just out of money or time or patience, though those fears are real, but out of something more fundamental. Why do you carry the sense, the deep, quiet, often unconscious sense, that there is some edge ahead of you, some point at which the road simply stops and there is nothing beyond it? Why do you organize your life around a fear of an edge that the universe itself refuses to have? Let me try to answer that. And let me answer it with something that I think is one of the most important ideas in all of physics, explained as simply as I can manage. There is a phenomenon in cosmology called a horizon, specifically the cosmic horizon or the Hubble horizon. It is the boundary of the observable universe, the sphere I described earlier, the edge of what we can see. And here is the crucial thing about a horizon. A horizon is not a wall. This seems obvious when I say it, but the implications are enormous. A wall is a real physical thing at a fixed location that you cannot pass through. A horizon is a function of where you are standing. It is a feature of your perspective, not a feature of the universe. Move from where you are standing, and the horizon moves with you. It always moves with you. The horizon is never a fixed property of the landscape. It is always and only a description of the limit of your current view. Think about what that means. The limits you can currently perceive, the limits of your options, your possibilities, your sense of what's available to you right now, are not properties of the world. They are properties of where you are standing. They are horizons, not walls. And horizons move when you do, not always easily, not always quickly. Sometimes moving far enough to change your horizon requires enormous effort and real courage, and the willingness to walk in a direction that currently looks like it leads nowhere because you can't yet see what's beyond your current line of sight. But it moves. It always moves. The universe does not build walls for you. It builds horizons. And the difference between a wall and a horizon is the difference between a fact and a perspective. One is fixed. One is yours to change. Now here is where it gets even stranger. Here is the paradox that I love most about horizons. The very thing that creates your horizon, your specific, located, finite, particular perspective, is also the thing that makes your view unique. No one else in the universe, literally, cosmically, has your exact vantage point. The observable universe as seen from your precise position in space and time has never been seen before and will never be seen again. Your limitation and your uniqueness are the same thing seen from different angles. The constraint that draws your horizon is the same constraint that makes you irreplaceable. You are not just another viewer of the cosmos. You are a specific, localized, unrepeatable window through which the cosmos views itself. And your particular window, your particular constraints, your particular horizon is not an obstacle to your seeing. It is your seeing. It is what gives your sight its character. So the next time you say, "I can't see how this gets better," and I know that feeling. I know what it is like to stand at the edge of what your current understanding can contain and feel genuinely, physically unable to see forward. Try to hear it differently. Try to hear it as, "I haven't moved far enough yet to see it." Not, "It isn't there." Not, "I'm not capable." But, "I'm not yet standing in the right place to see what I need to see." That distinction is not a comforting lie. It is the precise, accurate, physics-based description of your situation. You are at the edge of your current horizon, and the edge of your current horizon is not the end of the territory. It is an invitation to move. But here's the part that makes moving hard. Here's the thing that locks us in place, that keeps us standing at the same horizon long after we've seen everything there is to see from where we're standing. Moving toward a new horizon, revising our understanding, expanding our framework, growing into a larger version of what we are, requires us to be wrong about something we were absolutely sure of. And that, it turns out, is where the real courage lives. Not in being right, not in having figured things out, but in being willing to look at something you've believed completely and say, "I think I need to revise this." In physics, being wrong is not embarrassing. This cannot be stated strongly enough. It is not a flaw, it is not a failure, it is productive. It is the mechanism by which understanding advances. Every great leap forward in our knowledge of the cosmos has come not from someone being definitively right, but from someone being wrong in an interesting enough way that the wrongness itself pointed toward the truth. Newton was wrong. Let me say that clearly, because we spend a lot of time in school treating Newton as a kind of sacred text, as the final word on how things move. Newton was spectacularly, gloriously, magnificently wrong. His equations work beautifully. They still work, we still use them. We send spacecraft to Pluto using Newtonian mechanics. They are not useless, but they are incomplete. They fail at the edges. They break down when objects move close to the speed of light. They break down in regions of very strong gravity. They break down at the scale of atoms and smaller. At every edge where Newton's map stopped working, where his equations produced results that didn't match what the universe was actually doing, there was a clue. There was the universe saying, "Your model is wrong here, not wrong everywhere, not useless, but wrong here at this edge." And at those edges, those exact places where the map lied, Einstein was born. Quantum mechanics was born. The entire revolution of 20th century physics was born in the places where Newton was wrong. Now think about the implications of that for your own life. Every time you have been wrong about something important, about a relationship, about your own capabilities, about what you needed, about what was possible, the wrongness itself contained information. It was pointing towards something, not necessarily toward a tidy lesson, not necessarily toward a comfortable conclusion, but toward something more accurate, more complete, more true than what you were holding before. The wrongness was not a waste. The wrongness was the mechanism. The wrongness was doing exactly what it does in physics. It was pointing, with its failure, toward a better model. We've been taught that changing your mind is a sign of weakness, of inconsistency, of being unreliable. We've been trained to perform certainty even when we don't feel it, to project confidence even when we're genuinely unsure, to treat the revision of a previous position as a kind of defeat. And I want to say to you directly, that training is wrong. It is wrong not in a vague, feelings-based way, but in a precise, demonstrable, scientifically supported way. The entire history of human knowledge is a history of revision. Every single advance, without exception, required someone to be willing to say, "I was wrong about this. My previous model doesn't fit the data. I need a new one." The willingness to revise is not a character flaw. It is the engine of the entire scientific enterprise, and by extension of every kind of genuine growth. The more certain you are, the smaller your universe becomes. And I mean this literally, epistemologically. Certainly forecloses inquiry. When you are certain of something, truly, rigidly certain, you stop looking for evidence that contradicts it. You stop noticing the places where the model fails. You start explaining away the data that doesn't fit instead of asking what the data is trying to tell you. A person who is certain has, in a very real sense, drawn a wall around their understanding. And you can be safe behind a wall. You can be comfortable behind a wall, but you cannot expand behind a wall. The universe has never once expanded by building walls. It expands by breaking them. So here is the practice I want to offer you before we go further, not as an abstract exercise, but as a genuine question. What is one thing you are currently certain about yourself, about what's possible for you, about what you are or are not capable of? That might actually be a wall you've mistaken for a fact, not something you're slightly unsure about, something you're certain of, something you'd stake something on, because those are the most interesting things. Those are the places where your personal universe has stopped expanding. And I want you to just hold that question. Just notice where it lands. You don't have to do anything with it yet. Now let's talk about something that I have come to believe is genuinely underrated as a cognitive tool, not just as a nice feeling, not just as a pleasant side effect of understanding, as an actual, functional, irreplaceable part of how human beings process the world at their best. I'm talking about awe, and specifically about what it does mechanically to the way your mind works. There is a specific feeling that comes from genuine contact with something too large for your current framework to contain. You know this feeling. You may not have named it. It's the feeling you get standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon for the first time, or hearing a piece of music that is somehow impossibly more beautiful than music should be able to be, or watching a storm system from above when you're in a plane, or holding a newborn, or looking at the equations that describe general relativity and suddenly seeing in the mathematics itself a kind of aesthetic inevitability that makes you feel like you're reading something that was always true, that was waiting to be found. That feeling, that particular cocktail of something like fear and something like joy, that sense of being briefly larger than your normal self and simultaneously smaller than you usually think you are, that is awe. And for a long time, awe was treated in science as a byproduct, as something nice that happened when you learned something impressive, as emotional decoration on the edifice of understanding. But research, real empirical careful research, suggests that the relationship runs the other way. Awe doesn't follow understanding, awe enables it. The experience of encountering something genuinely larger than your current model creates a specific cognitive state, a temporary suspension of small-mindedness, a moment in which your normal, habitual, highly efficient categorizing mind, the part that files everything immediately into known bins, is briefly overwhelmed. And in that moment of overwhelm, in that window of genuine cognitive disorientation, new information can actually enter without being immediately neutralized, without being filed away before it's really felt, without being processed into a form that your existing framework can comfortably contain. R is the antidote to premature certainty. Here is the paradox. We are not designed to handle infinity comfortably. We are designed to handle lunch and social relationships and the immediate physical environment. Infinity is not something our brains evolved to process, and when we encounter it, when we genuinely, honestly confront the fact that the universe may be infinite, that there are more stars than we can count even in principle, that the light hitting our eyes right now is millions of years old, that the atoms in our bodies were forged inside exploding stars, there is a moment of genuine cognitive overwhelm, and that moment, that specific kind of overwhelm, turns out to be one of the most useful and healing experiences a human being can have, because it temporarily, reliably, consistently makes your problems the right size. Not smaller than they are, your problems are real, I'm not dismissing them, but proportionate, placed inside something so much larger than themselves that their scale becomes accurate rather than exaggerated. Most of us, most of the time, spend our lives with our problems slightly too large, slightly out of proportion with reality. The anxiety about the job, or the relationship, or the health issue, or the money, or the thing someone said, or the thing you did. It expands to fill the available space. It becomes, in your internal landscape, the size of everything. And that's not because you're weak or broken. That's because your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It is treating every perceived threat as the most important thing in your environment, because in the environment we evolved in, that was the right strategy. But we live now in an environment of abstracted threats, of social fears, of diffuse anxieties that don't resolve when you run away or fight back. And for those kinds of threats, the evolutionary strategy backfires, the anxiety expands, the problem becomes the whole horizon. R is the corrective, not a cure, not a solution, but a corrective. A recalibration standing in front of something genuinely, authentically, overwhelmingly large. The night sky, the ocean, a great cathedral, the proof of Gödel's incompleteness theorems, a symphony by Beethoven, the face of someone you love as they sleep, does something specific and measurable to the relationship between your problems and your sense of what contains them. It reminds your nervous system, in a language it understands, that there is more, that the horizon is not the edge, that you are inside something vast. You cannot think your way to awe. You cannot produce it on demand through an act of will. You have to be ambushed by it, and you get ambushed by it by putting yourself in front of things that are genuinely too big for your current story about the world to contain. The universe provides these ambushes constantly. We just stop looking. We stop looking because we're busy, and because looking feels like a luxury. And because, in a culture that values productivity above almost everything else, standing in front of something beautiful and simply being overwhelmed feels like a waste of time. It is not a waste of time. It is maintenance. It is necessary cognitive maintenance. It is keeping the windows clean so that light can actually enter. And this connects to something I want to say that might be the strangest and most important thing in this whole conversation. Because we've been talking about the universe as something out there, as something separate from us that we observe, that we study, that we are impressed by or overwhelmed by or anxious about. But here is the thing that quantum mechanics and cosmology and the most careful thinking about what it means to be an observer inside a system keeps pointing toward. You are not looking at the universe from outside. You cannot be. You are inside the universe. The atoms in your body, the carbon, the oxygen, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones were not created on Earth. They were forged inside stars, in the nuclear furnaces at the hearts of stars that lived and died before our sun existed. You are made of stellar material. You are, in the most precise, literal chemical sense, a product of the cosmos, not a visitor to it, not an observer standing outside it, a part of it. And more than that, at the most fundamental level of physics, at the level of quantum mechanics, which is the level at which the universe actually operates, the distinction between observer and observed is not clean. It is not firm. It is in a precise technical sense negotiable. The act of observing a quantum system changes the system not because your instruments are clumsy, not because you bumped into it, but because at the foundational level of reality, observer and observed are entangled. They are, in some sense, that physicists are still arguing about but cannot honestly dismiss, the same event viewed from different positions. You are not separate from what you're looking at. When you look at the night sky, you are not a human being looking at the universe from a safe distance. You are the universe looking at itself. Through your particular set of eyes, in your particular place in space and time, with your particular history and fears and hopes and questions, the universe is examining itself. That is not poetry, though it is also poetry. That is the honest conclusion of the physics. And the loneliness, the deep, sometimes unbearable loneliness that I think many of us carry. The sense of being fundamentally separate from other people, from nature, from the cosmos, from any sense of meaning or belonging. I want to suggest that this loneliness, which is real as an experience, is not accurate as a description of your actual situation. It is a perceptual artifact, a consequence of being small enough and busy enough and distracted enough to forget that you are part of something vast. The separation you feel is not the truth of your relationship to the universe. It is the feeling you get when you forget what you are. And what you are, stripped of all the stories, all the categories, all the social roles and anxieties and self-conceptions, is a localized, temporary, astonishingly complex arrangement of the same matter and energy that has been doing everything else in this universe for 13.8 billion years. You are not separate from the stars. You are downstream from them. You are made of them. You are in a lineage that is entirely traceable and entirely real, their child. When you look up at the night sky and feel far from something, that feeling of distance, that ache, I want you to consider the possibility that what you're actually feeling is the pull of recognition, not separation from the universe, recognition by it. The universe, through your eyes, noticing itself and finding it remarkable, finding you remarkable, not because you've done anything to earn it, but because you exist, and to exist in this universe, to be a temporary, self-aware arrangement of its matter, to be able to look back at it and feel something that is already extraordinary. That was always, already extraordinary. Now we come to the last and most important lesson, the one that takes everything we've said, about edges and horizons, about maps and territory, about old light still arriving, about wrongness as a mechanism, about awe as a tool, about being made of stars, and asks you to do the most terrifying, most liberating, most profoundly honest thing: to not know. On purpose, deliberately, as a practice, as a stance, as a way of moving through the world. I know how that sounds. In a world that demands certainty, that rewards the performance of having it figured out, that treats visible hesitation as weakness and intellectual humility as incompetence, being willing to not know feels dangerous. It feels like exposure. It feels like admitting something you should be hiding. So let me tell you what physics actually says about not knowing, and then let me tell you why I think it is not a weakness, but a superpower. At the quantum level, at the level where the universe's actual fundamental operating instructions are written, there is uncertainty built into the system. Not because our instruments are imprecise, not because we haven't developed the right mathematics yet, but because the universe, at its most basic level, holds multiple possibilities open simultaneously. A quantum particle does not have a definite position until it is observed. It exists in a superposition of multiple possible states, all of them real in a technical sense, until the moment of measurement forces a single outcome. The universe, at its foundation, is genuinely, structurally, irreducibly uncertain. It does not resolve into a single determined state until forced to. It lives, by preference, in a space of multiple open possibilities. Werner Heisenberg formalized this in his uncertainty principle. There are pairs of properties, position and momentum, for example, that cannot both be known precisely at the same time, not because of experimental limitations, but because the precision with which you know one determines the limit of what you can know about the other. The more precisely you locate a particle, the less precisely you can know how fast it's moving. The more precisely you know its momentum, the less you can know about where it is. This is not a technological problem. This is a fact about the structure of reality. The universe has uncertainty built into it at a level more fundamental than any instrument we could build. Now, most people, when they hear this, feel unsettled. They feel like this is bad news, like the universe is less reliable than they thought, like something has been taken away. But I want to propose the opposite interpretation. What if the uncertainty at the heart of physics is not bad news? What if it is the universe's most fundamental act of generosity? What if a universe that holds multiple possibilities open is better, more alive, more creative, more genuinely interesting than a universe that has everything determined in advance? Because here's the thing: a fully determined universe, a universe where every state follows mechanically and inevitably from every previous state, where there are no genuine possibilities, only outcomes that haven't happened yet, that universe has no room. No room for novelty, no room for surprise, no room for anything genuinely new to emerge. A universe that lives in superposition, that holds multiple possibilities open until forced to choose, is a universe in which the future is genuinely, structurally, irreducibly open. And that openness is not a bug. That openness is the space in which everything interesting happens. You are made of particles that live in that openness. The matter that makes up your body and your brain is quantum matter, operating under quantum rules. You are not a determined machine running out a predetermined program. You are a part of a universe that holds possibilities open by principle, that resolves them through interaction, that creates genuine novelty through the play of uncertainty. The future is not written, not because we haven't read far enough ahead, but because it isn't written yet. The writing is happening now. You are part of the writing. And this brings me to the thing I most want to say about not knowing. The people who have made the most difference in any field, in science, in art, in leadership, in love, are almost never the people who were most certain. They are the people who were most comfortable with genuine uncertainty, who could hold a question long enough for the question to mature, who did not rush to fill the silence of not knowing with a fast answer, but who stayed in the silence, stayed with the question, let it develop, let it deepen, let it lead somewhere that a quick answer would have foreclosed. Richard Feynman, and I will speak about this in the first person, because I am, in this conversation, asking you to hear his voice, to hear his way of thinking. Richard Feynman spent his career explicitly celebrating not knowing. He said in various ways throughout his life, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." He said, "The beauty of science is that it begins with not knowing and considers that a worthy starting point." He said, "The first step to getting anywhere is to admit you don't know where you are." This is not false modesty. This is not a performance of humility by someone who is secretly certain. This is the honest operating principle of someone who has seen again and again that certainty closes doors and uncertainty opens them. That the person who says, "I know," stops looking, and the person who says, "I wonder," never has to stop. I know the world tells you to have a plan, to know where you're going, to project confidence and certainty and clear-eyed direction. And I'm not telling you to abandon planning. I'm not telling you to wallow in confusion. I'm telling you that underneath the plan, underneath the performance of certainty, underneath the face you show the world and sometimes even yourself, there is a place of genuine, humble, courageous not knowing. A place where you honestly don't know how this turns out, where you don't know if you're making the right choices, where you're not certain of your own next move. And that place is not a frightening place. Or rather, it is sometimes frightening, but it is not a dangerous place. It is the most alive place there is. It is where the universe lives. It is where you live, if you're willing to be honest. I want to tell you one more thing about the edge of the universe before we start talking about what to do with all of this. One more thing that I think is the most beautiful and the most humanly useful fact in all of cosmology. The universe is expanding. Right now, as you watch this, every second of every day, the space between galaxy clusters is growing. The universe is getting larger. Not because matter is moving outward through space the way a ball flies through the air, but because space itself is expanding. The fabric of space-time, the medium through which everything moves, is stretching, and it has been doing this since the very beginning, since the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang, without pause, without rest, accelerating, in fact. The expansion is speeding up, driven by a mysterious energy we call dark energy because we don't understand it well enough to call it anything more specific than that. The universe is not only expanding, it is expanding faster and faster. Now, where is it expanding into? This is the question everyone asks, and it is a question that the universe, in its characteristic way, refuses to answer cleanly. The honest answer is, we don't know. It may not be expanding into anything. Space may not require a pre-existing container to expand into. Space may be self-creating, self-defining, generating its own room as it goes. The edge of the universe is not a place where space stops and something else begins. There may be no edge in that sense. There may be, as I said earlier, no edge at all. And the universe is doing this extraordinary, constant, accelerating expansion into what may be nothing, into what may be more of itself, into something we have no name for yet. Without drama, without needing to know what it's expanding into. It just expands. Quietly, constantly, without any fanfare or declaration. It just goes outward. It just goes onward. It just becomes more. I find this, and I want to use the word carefully, I find this moving, not just intellectually interesting. Moving. Because it describes something that I think we are all, at our best, capable of. This quality of continuing to expand even when you can't see what you're expanding into, of continuing to grow even when the direction of growth takes you into territory that has no map, of continuing to become even when you don't know yet what you're becoming. The universe doesn't wait until it understands dark energy before it expands. It doesn't pause the expansion pending clarification of the mechanism. It just does it. It just keeps going. And somehow, in the simplest possible way, I think that is the instruction. Keep going. Not recklessly, not without thought, but with the deep, steady, cosmically backed confidence that going forward, even into the unknown, even without a complete map, even in the face of genuine uncertainty, is what the universe itself has been doing since before time as we understand it began. Now, I want to give you some things to actually do. Because everything I've said in the last 30-some minutes is worthless if it stays in your head as a collection of interesting ideas. The universe doesn't care about your concept of the cosmos. It cares about what you do with the brief, extraordinary, unrepeatable moment of being alive. So let me give you 5 practices. Not challenges, not assignments. Practices. Things you can return to. Things that get deeper over time. Things that are simple enough to start today and rich enough to last years. The first one I want to call the horizon walk. I want you to go outside. Literally, physically outside. Find a place where you can see a horizon, even a partial one, even a city skyline, even the line where the sky meets the rooftops across the street. Stand there for 10 minutes, without your phone, without a podcast, without anything filling the silence, and look at the line where visible becomes invisible, where what you can see ends and what you can't see begins. And then ask yourself, out loud if you have the courage, silently if you don't quite yet, what is just beyond what I can currently see about my own life? Not rhetorically, genuinely. What is the thing that feels like it might be there, just past the edge of what you can currently perceive? And then, this is the important part, sit with not knowing the answer. Don't reach for a fast answer. Don't fill the silence with comfortable guesses. Just sit with the question and the horizon together and let your nervous system learn, slowly, that the horizon is not the end. You're practicing what physicists call maintaining an open system. You're telling the part of your brain that generates anxiety, the part that responds to uncertainty as if it were a threat. You're telling it, the horizon is not a wall. I can be here, at this edge of my current view, and be okay. The edge is not an emergency. The edge is just the edge of where I'm standing right now, and that practice, done regularly, changes something, not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. Over time, it changes your relationship with not knowing. It makes the unknown feel less like a threat, and more like, and I want to choose this word carefully, more like an invitation. The second practice I want to call one beautiful wrong belief. And here's what I want you to do. Get a piece of paper. Actual paper, not a screen. The physical act matters. And write down one thing you used to believe about yourself, or about what was possible for you, that turned out to be wrong. Not a tiny thing. Something you really believed. Something you would have staked something on. And specifically, and this is the key, I want you to find the beauty in its wrongness. Not the pain, not the embarrassment, not the time you feel you wasted holding a belief that wasn't true. The beauty. The way that being wrong about that thing made room for something better. The door that opened in the wall of your certainty. Because here is what I know. Every person who has ever grown, really grown, not just accumulated years, but actually become more than they were, has a list of beliefs they used to hold that they no longer hold, a list of things they were certain of that they are now certain were wrong, and that list, that record of revision, is not a list of failures. It is a record of expansion. It is evidence of a life that kept going past its own horizons. Read it as such. The third practice is what I want to call the awe appointment, and I am completely serious about the word appointment. Put it in your calendar. Schedule it. 1 hour per week, minimum, dedicated to deliberate encounter with something genuinely larger than your current concerns. The rules are these. It must be real. It cannot be a YouTube compilation of someone else being awed. It must involve your actual physical presence, or your actual sustained attention. And it must be something that you don't fully understand. Because the things you fully understand cannot awe you. Understanding is the opposite of awe, in a sense. Understanding is containment, and awe is the experience of something that resists containment. This could be the night sky if you can get somewhere dark enough to see the Milky Way, not the suburb version, the real thing. Do it, and do it regularly. It could be music. Sit with a piece of music that is too large for you, that you don't fully get, and listen to it until it ambushes you. It could be mathematics. It could be a forest. It could be the ocean. It could be a great building. It could be the face of someone you love, really looked at, without agenda, without the habitual shorthand of familiarity. The medium is less important than the regularity. Our way is not a luxury. It is maintenance. It is what keeps the windows clean. The fourth practice is the one I find most profound, and it requires the least effort but perhaps the most willingness. I want to call it the entanglement check. And once a day, when you feel most alone, most separate, most like a small and isolated thing in a large and indifferent universe, I want you to name 3 things you are physically made of that came from somewhere else. 3 things that are in your body right now that have a history extending far beyond your biography. The oxygen in your lungs right now was released by plants, by the photosynthetic activity of living things that have been doing this work for billions of years. The iron in your blood, the iron that makes your blood red, that carries the oxygen your brain runs on, was forged in the nuclear fusion reactions inside massive stars that lived and died before our solar system existed. The calcium in your bones was made in the same stellar furnaces. The water in your cells has cycled through this planet for billions of years, through oceans and clouds and glaciers and rivers and other living things without number. You are not newly made. You are assembled from parts with an extraordinary history. You are the universe's latest use for material it has been working with for an incomprehensible amount of time. Name 3 of them, every day. Not as a performance, not to feel better in a forced way, but as a calibration, as a daily reminder of the most accurate available description of what you actually are. You are not isolated. You are embedded. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are a particular, local, temporary arrangement of it. The loneliness is real as a feeling. It is not accurate as a fact. And the 5th practice, the one I want to leave you with as the most portable, most available, most applicable to the moments when you most need something, I want to call the unfinished sentence. It works like this. When you feel you are approaching your edge, whatever edge that is, the edge of your patience, your resources, your courage, your sense of who you are and what you're capable of, when you feel the ground getting thin under you, when you feel the vertigo of an approaching limit, get something to write on and write at the top of it these 5 words. I don't yet know how. And then finish the sentence. I don't yet know how I'll get through this. I don't yet know how to fix this. I don't yet know how to become what I need to become. I don't yet know how to love this person well. I don't yet know how to find my way. The word yet is doing enormous work in that sentence. It is not a consolation prize. It is not a piece of wishful thinking. It is a precise, accurate, scientifically grounded description of your relationship to the future. You don't yet know, but the yet acknowledges that the not knowing is temporary, that you are inside a process, not at an ending, that the story is not over, that the universe, which has been expanding for 13.8 billion years and has not stopped yet, which has been producing novelty and complexity and surprise and beauty for an incomprehensible amount of time, and has not stopped yet, is the context in which you are operating. And in that context, I don't yet know is not a statement of defeat. It is a statement of participation. It is an alignment with the universe's own operating principle, still going, still becoming, still not done. I don't yet know how. And that is not a frightening place to be. That is the most honest place there is. We've traveled a long way together. From the edge of the observable universe, that luminous sphere 93 billion light-years across, beyond which lies more of the same, and beyond that more, and beyond that something we don't yet have the instruments or the mathematics or the courage to name, all the way down to a sentence on a blank page, written in the middle of a difficult night. And I want to take a few minutes now not to summarize what we've said, because summaries flatten things, and I don't want to flatten this, but to hold the thread, to trace what we actually found. We found that the universe doesn't have an edge, and that this is not a failure of discovery. It is a fundamental feature of the system. The universe declines to end. It declines to be contained. It expands perpetually into what may be nothing, into what may be more of itself, into something we don't yet have a word for, and it does so without apology and without explanation. That is not a philosophical position the universe has adopted. That is simply what the universe does. We found that the maps we draw always end before the territory does. Every model, every theory, every story we tell about reality, including the stories we tell about ourselves, about our capabilities, about what's possible for us, is smaller than the thing it describes. That is not a failure of the map maker. It is a built-in feature of the relationship between description and reality. Reality is always larger than any description of it. The map always ends before the territory does. And the appropriate response to that fact is not despair and not the paralysis of infinite revision, but a kind of lightness, a willingness to hold the map with an open hand, to use it because it's useful and revise it when it isn't, to know that you are always working with an approximation and that that's not a problem. That's the condition of understanding. We found that old light is still light, that the experiences, the knowledge, the pain, the love, the insight that came from earlier versions of your life are still arriving, are still illuminating something, are not disqualified from participating in your present by virtue of their age or their origin. The past is not a place you leave, it is a source you carry. We found that horizons move when you do, that the limits you can currently perceive are not walls, they are views, they are descriptions of where you are standing, not descriptions of what exists. Move, and they move. And the constraint that draws your current horizon is the same constraint that makes your view unique. Your limitation and your irreplaceability are the same thing seen from different angles. We found that being wrong is how understanding grows. That revision is not failure, but mechanism. That the willingness to say, my previous model doesn't fit what I'm seeing, is not weakness, but the most essential cognitive tool available. That Newton was wrong. That every great advance began in the places where the current map failed. That your own wrongnesses, the beliefs you've revised, the certainties you've released, are not failures in your biography. They are evidence of a life that kept going past its own horizons. We found that awe is not decoration, it is medicine. It is the recalibration that makes your problems the right size. It is the cognitive state in which genuinely new information can enter without being immediately neutralized. It is what keeps you from sealing yourself inside a world that has stopped expanding.